loud place in case I get disconnected. If you notice, if those of you who have joined before, this is not my normal background. I'm actually at a conference today on classical education. I homeschool my kids, and so I'm learning about how to do classical education today. And interestingly, we were just talking about memory and how foundational memory practice is to thinking over the course of your life. And so I think there'll be some interesting tie-ins between that, this concept of like, you have to, there's no thinking without memorizing, like being able to hold those topics in your mind in order to think about them. I think we'll have some interesting overlaps today. But anyway, let me go ahead and walk us through this. Let me go share my screen. Got a tiny little overview of what we do here at Tools for Thought Rocks, and then we'll go let Bill go. Here we go. All right. Y'all should see Tools for Thought Rocks logo, hopefully. Great. Cool. Tools for Thought Rocks is a meetup group and just a group of like-minded folks where we talk about everything from whatever you might want to call these things: tools for thought, digital gardens, second brains, whatever. This is a group for both the creators of tools, but also just makers that use these tools, and really to share tips, techniques, usage. How are we going about using our computers and our tools in order to help us think better? And then we really focus, one additional focus here is we talk a lot about interchange, about like, how do we actually make these tools work together, as opposed to focusing on any specific tool. Right now, the community is all managed through Luma. Every one of you that ended up in here today probably had to sign up through Luma and go through the Zoom link. And so if you're here, you're already a member of this. If you're not, if you're listening to this recording, go to toolsforthought.rocks and sign up for the community, because in that way you will get notifications of future meetings and any kind of, you're basically automatically signed up for a mailing list. A couple other things that we do use is we have a Discord channel. We ride on the backs of the Fission Discord channel in order to not have a whole nother Discord. So if you wanted to chat with folks, you can join the Fission Discord at fission.code/Discord. And there's a Tools for Thought channel where a lot of us are hanging out and will and dialogue with you if you prefer. We also store the recordings for these events on YouTube, so you can go to the YouTube channel for Tools for Thought Rocks and watch all the past recordings. There have been some great ones, so if this is like one of your first ones, I definitely recommend going back through the back catalog. There's been some really great talks over the last several months. And then we lightly use the GitHub repo to store chat transcripts and that kind of stuff. Not very consistent on that front. Right now, mostly this is a monthly speaker series. We will do this usually the last week of the month. And if you'd like to speak, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to Boris, or you can fill out this Airtable link or drop by Discord, or just get in touch. Smoke signals will work, whatever it is. And you can come chat about some stuff. So finally, like as we're going through and talking, feel free to just unmute yourself. We're a small enough group today. I think there's 15 people here. You can unmute and interrupt. I'll let Bill and Tony kind of set the groundworks for their presentation. So if they're saying, hey, let me talk this through for 10 minutes, and then feel free to interrupt me, I'll let them set the ground rules. But for the most part, you'll have the ability to unmute. You can also use chat if that's more comfortable for you, and myself or Boris might interject if as appropriate into Tony or Bill's talk and present that question if you want to do it that way, if you're not comfortable with unmuting yourself. Cool. So without further ado, I will, yeah, go ahead, Boris. Anything else?
One more ado. So we're going to actually, we have just last night settled on our first in-person Tools for Thought Rocks. So that is going to be the end of June. So roughly around the same time as we usually do our live meetings in New York. So I think we're going to have Linus and Gordon Brander are two likely main speakers. We'll have room for lightning talks, and we'll be meeting in person and likely going out for dinner afterwards. So anyone in the New York area or people that you know in the New York area, send them our way. I think broadly speaking as well, we would like people to use Tools for Thought Rocks in the community to also organize their own events. So whether that's in person or online, this is a space that we want everyone to be able to use as a platform, because we've collected a lot of like-minded people together. We don't own this. We have collected some like-minded people together, and we want everyone to used equally. If you want to do more, get in touch. We are always looking for volunteers, and so far we have not been able to turn on more of them. So think about how you might want to contribute.
Yeah. I mean, Boris and I are basically doing this because we wanted to attend talks about this kind of thing. And so we realized that if we wanted to attend them, we had to organize it. And they've been happening and they've been great, but we would love to attend more. And so feel free to like make more awesome stuff happen and we'll be there. That's Thursday. That is Sunday, June 27th. And we're looking at like mid-afternoon, 3 to 6, somewhere around in that time frame in the New York area. So great. All right. So let us go ahead and get started. Bill will be giving our first presentation today. So Bill Seitz has been the most interesting thing about Bill is that if you ever talk with Bill, he will pepper you with links to his wiki, and which is really neat context of here's how I've been thinking about this topic over time. And you can kind of systematically go and explore sort of Bill's thinking over time through his wiki. And what I actually asked him to come speak today because I'm really curious about how he has gotten to this, I mean, there's a lot of writing there. It's a lot of time that he's taken over time. So I'm curious of how he's gotten to that and like what lessons he's learned and that kind of stuff. So super excited to hear Bill, pepper us with links.
Cool.
Go ahead, Bill.
I can't pepper myself with links in the chat line, but I'll apologize in advance. I have a horrible cold, and so I may sound ridiculous. Could I get the power to share the screen here?
You certainly can.
All righty. And hopefully we won't end up with any weird issues. I was going to try and make slides like people make, but I hate making slides. So I decided to just stick with my tool of thought that I use for generating ideas often, which is FreeMind, mind mapping tool. So you're getting a top-down look of stuff I'm going to talk about. I have a page on my Wikilog that has the notes from when I gave a talk somewhat similar to this to some coworkers a few years back. I'll talk a little bit about my goals and mindset that have carried through my sort of writing history. And then I'll sort of shortcut to some kind of hot takes around tools for thought and things like that, instead of saving them for the end. So if you're immediately surging with anger, you can get that out of your system early. And then I'll get into a little bit more detail on sort of the adjusting of my activities and headset over 2 decades, the tools that I use, ideas around connections and interactions with other people's tools and so forth, and then a little bit into how I use it privately versus publicly. And we can jump around or do whatever. I don't have a huge performance mentality for this stuff, so feel free to interrupt, as you like. I think goals and mindset are crucial for this community. A pattern which I see almost daily and which makes me always want to scream into my pillow is a tendency for people to get obsessed with tools and with specific features for tools, and with kind of this theory that like, if only I had an AI that was telling me which of my ideas was best, then I wouldn't be such a loser, or whatever. Or, politics would be solved if the AI would tell us when somebody's lying. And if I could just create the right ontology, it'll have the lie flag on it and everything will be solved. And I think there's a lot of blue sky stuff there. And my belief is that the way to move tools forward is in specific contexts for specific needs. And then it goes out from there. If you try to sort of top down a vision of the universe, number one, you tend to overcomplicate it. You tend to create insane trees of activity, which then no human will ever do except you. And so like you've suckered people into creating tools that will have 3 users and go out of business and then blah, blah, blah. Or you'll also suck people into spending a lot of time doing things that have no actual payback for their lives. I think that's one of the big risks in the sort of note-taking surge, is that there's a real sort of cargo cult kind of potential for like, oh, the cool kids are keeping, a digital garden, and so I need to do that. And gee, it's sucking up all my time, and I don't see my kids anymore because I'm writing notes, you know. So I think I think the specific goals that you have help anchor things. Although for anyone's individual activity, personal passion is obviously a key driver. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sucked so much time into it as I have over the last 20 years. And so, but having a little bit of check on that in terms of what the hell am I doing and why is, I think, important, both from a personal behavior standpoint and in terms of thinking about what tool will actually help you accomplish what your real goal is, which is not better notes, but something outside of that. And so that's important. So for me, this has always come from, like, it's heavily related to kind of the key blogging mentality around share cool things that you run across, you know, cool news of the day kind of stuff. Then taking in information from the world, sense making around it, summarizing that into what you think is a sort of model of reality, and then sharing that out with other people. I've had a sort of history of kind of mental frameworks that I apply to the whole universe in that standard digital garden crank kind of way. The latest one I call network enlightenment, which is kind of the idea of creating a new enlightenment, but based around appreciation and recognition of network effects and emergence and things like that, as opposed to structured top-down things. And I think that relates to tool design and business design and society design and all that kind of stuff. Which relates to my next point, is that I jumped on the backlinks wagon a long time ago in wikis because it's all connected, man. Or to take the more noisy way of putting it, everything is deeply intertwinkled. And so tags and categories suck. There's not enough of them. They're not in line to give them the right context for things. They're just a little too broken as a process. So they can help you get started, but they create walls between your thoughts, I think, more than good connections. Turning that into outside world change, so it's not just banking. Somebody's got a cat. Okay, in terms of affecting the outside world, I think I come back to sort of the Douglas Engelbart mentality, which is that the world is increasingly complex. There's increasingly complex problems that causes from scale and system complexity. And so the old ways of thinking and improving process are probably not sufficient to meet those challenges, whether it's about climate change or pandemics or political authoritarianism or any other thing. I mean, I have a whole bunch of lists of different challenges on my Wikilog. And so I like to see tools around note writing as something that starts from the individual's increased kind of intelligence and capability, spreads out into small groups, spreads out into the outside world, and hopefully makes society a little bit more coherent and rational. So the goal that I do not have is to generate more Medium posts. I think that that's one of the other things that makes me scream in the notes community, is I feel like there's a lot of people who don't want to think out loud. They want to sort of create, publish stuff, and then magically, you know, end up with a community that pays them money, or create a cohort-based class to get people to pay them money or something like that. It's very chasing its own tail and seeking seeking a business model or something.
Right. So I think the label for those are info products. So yes. A lot of people running small businesses, writing courses, where as a popularity in any area that you can name rises up. I'm kind of saying this out loud to like try and get feedback. This is my version that I don't have in a note somewhere to write it down, to link to yet. Yeah, like basically people notice that there's a niche area, and then people build info products or courses about how to get better at note taking. So they're teaching the practice without the outcome. That's a fair way of saying it, Bill?
Yeah, and I think the other piece of it is, as we've had sort of the growth of the creator economy, is that everybody has this dream of they can tell their boss to take this job and shove it, and they can sit at home in their underwear and write Medium posts and still pay their mortgage. And so I think that that creates kind of a model of info product creation around like, oh, well, I don't want to sort of share my raw notes because I want to turn it into a polished, lovely post, which will drive traffic to my newsletter, which will, you know, blah, 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 pay for my kids' college education. And so I think that that, again, kind of derails the sort of composty ecosystem potential for people having ideas and getting feedback on them.
And Bill, is it fair to say, to like summarize your argument here, to say that if people were to communicate earlier and more often and more freely, that in like more unstructured ways, that the combination of that thinking with other people's thinking would be more fertile than delaying that post and attaching an economic incentive to that post, you know, content production?
And I think that, you know, 95% of ideas never make it to the published post anyway. So instead of
certainly true for mine,
giant, you know, funnel there, it's kind of like the, you know, alien life that we can't find. Instead of having this stuff, you know, all sort of dark matter of the internet that's in people's drafts folders, just get the shit out there. And then if somebody's interested, if people are interested in the raw stuff, then that creates the drive to refine it more, and maybe it becomes an info product down the road. But to treat them like gold when they're fertilizer is, I think, is not a healthy thing. I think it just reinforces kind of a fear and scarcity kind of mentality, which doesn't have an upside as far as I'm concerned. So in case none of that was hot enough, let's see what I wrote down here. My ontology rant of the day, its claims all the way down, its models all the way down. Humans and brains are messy, complex things. And so two people can't use the same word and have it actually mean the same thing. And a single person can't even use the same word 2 hours apart and have it mean the same thing. So thinking that if we properly label and name and join our ideas with enough metadata, that somehow a computer will be able to reason from them is, I think, a fool's errand. And I think that there may be structures, maybe tools will be helpful in creating a more structured way of writing that will help make written communication more logical. I think that there's possibly some possibility there. You know, if you sort of take like to take a crazy example, there was this old thing. It's still not a dead cult, but it's a tiny cult around the language called E prime, which is basically English, but without the verb to be or is, coming from the general semantics idea that is always fake, is always false, because A is never A. You know, A looks like A smells like A, but A is always different than A. And so, you know, you can say A can be modeled as A, but so the idea was, if the more that you take isms out of your speaking and writing, the more you will be driven to a more active and precise form of writing. And so we could say a tool that forced you to not use is might help you become a better communicator. But I don't think it would automatically happen that way. And, you know, you could give any speechwriter from Washington, DC, a tool like that, and they would stop using the phrase is, but they would still generate bullshit. So I think that there's how much tool solves the problem, you know, versus is kind of a nudge, is, I think, a big thing there.
I think there's something really interesting you were saying that I like. We know, or we should know, that in the tools for thought, so that's a phrase that has more than one meaning, and what people mean by it. Digital garden, second brain, these are niche signifier words, and they are actually signals that were in the same semantic domain. For many people in our own brains, we could get super pedantic. It's like, no, it doesn't mean the same thing. But I wonder if there is the basics of linking. And I think, Bill, you've done that with slugs. And maybe talk about that. I think that's a useful bridge of almost like the anti-semantics.
Right. It's a looser way of looking at things. the terms that you'll see that I use for that are twin pages across sister sites, which is a term that comes back from the original wiki, from the C2 wiki in 1999. That's not something that I created. So I've just, tried to maintain that vocabulary. And in the same way that backlinks, if you write a lot, your backlinks will give you sort of too much stuff. And so the question is, how much context can you return when you're looking at a list of backlinks, so that you're saying, I'm having this idea that I'm noodling on right now, and it's related to this concept. And oh, here's a cloud of stuff I've written about that before I'm finding through my backlinks. I'm looking at my series of slugs and saying, oh yeah, that article, I remember that. Let me look at that more carefully. And then maybe I come up with a new, node name based on this thinking session and so forth. So I'm starting with too much semi-related stuff, and then using my own brain to kind of curate at the moment a new word or a new phrase or a new concept that I will pull different things together as kind of a refinement of a more general term earlier. I feel like sometimes I'm talking airy-fairy here, so feel free to ask me what the fuck I mean, or give an example or something like that if you think I'm going too far into the universe. So this sort of leads into this next point I have, that automation is suggestive, not trustworthy. So any tool that sort of says, hey, here's some related ideas, that's awesome. It's going to give you too much, but it won't give you everything. So that's good. It's helping you winnow things and temporarily direct your attention. But to assume that some piece of software is going to tell you like the best 3 links to look at from your history or something like that is, again, I think unrealistic, and only creates overcomplicated tools, overcomplicated process, stuff that won't run on your phone. Whoever knows what all the side effects of all that complexity are. And so I just think that people need to get realistic about stuff. And I think that there's it's kind of like the underpants profit model, from Dilbert or whoever that was, with the, the collect underpants and then the big question mark in the middle and then profit at the end. I think that there's a lot of people that are at the collecting underpants area, and there's no real bridge to profit there. So therefore, my bias is always keep it simple and worse is better. And I think that becomes especially true when we start trying to talk about the cross-person community ecosystem, because the more that we're saying, like, how can we get ideas that multiple people are having to sort of get connected and create human dialogue, keeping things simple so that those are findable, as opposed to like, oh, I can't mesh my, corpus with yours unless I have exactly the right ontology being shared or something like that. The more brittle, and over-defined those things are, I think it just, again, lowers the energy level. And I think the human brain state has to be kept in the middle of the loop, essentially, as doing that taste-based sort of thinking about stuff. And so tools I don't think will ever solve those problems. And so I think you should have a very specific need, a very specific pain with a very specific outcome that a very specific tool extension will give you before you say, this would be a great idea. And then sometimes you do build the tool or get somebody else to build the tool, and you see if it actually happened. And if it's like, oh, I have all these, it's like the guy who wrote the thing about how like, oh, I stopped using Roam because I didn't go back and look at my notes anyway. It's like, well, no tool is going to change that. Like if your motivation isn't really there and your interest isn't really there, which is going to be true for most people, then backlinks and fancier features are probably not going to solve that problem for you. It's kind of like, it's like I need targeted medicine. It's like, no, why don't you just get out of bed? Why don't you sleep 8 hours, get out of bed, eat healthier food, and take a walk? You don't need to have a magic machine that's measuring your metabolism, at each second and uploading it to your, to your whole measurement system. It's like you get most of that benefit from a small amount of behavior, activity and a small amount of monitoring. Just to establish a timeline as a pseudo form of credibility, I'm really, really old. I was interested in this stuff pre-web, or at least pre-normal human web. Like, Tim had his web running, on a Next machine, but I didn't have a Next machine. So before the web exists, before Mosaic, basically, before there was Mosaic for Mac and Macintosh, to me, the web didn't really exist. And so in the days before that, I was interested in hypertext already, just as, subjectively recognizing that like ideas are messy and information is messy. And so, clean hierarchies are not really a way to get very far. You need to have something that, gives you a manageable mush of stuff. And so HyperCard is something I was very interested in. There was a tool called Guide for making, electronic documents, little hypertexty type things and stuff like that. But they were all very closed systems. And HyperCard obviously was never a multi-user or a network-based kind of system either, and was killed before it could possibly go in that direction. And I've got all sorts of fun articles on my site about the history of HyperCard and why it was killed and when, all different theories and opinions. So anyhow, so I was interested in that. Then when the web came along, I was building a medical publishing startup right away. And I also then, people started sending emails around to each other of like cool links of the day. And so then this blogging idea was out there. And so I started, making an ugly little, manual HTML page where it looked kind of like a Dave Weiner blog. And then I had one page for every month. And then there was a block for every day. And then all the entries were inside that block, and so I would keep editing over the course of the day. And then I would copy the fresh HTML file up onto the server, which was hidden in my company's server, and that was my blog for a year. And then later I moved to Dave's service. Interestingly, our business's web business was running on Macintoshes because we came from print publishing. And so that's what we had. And so I was using Dave's framework to build version 1 of our website business. And so, that was, ironically, that was the Medscape business, which launched 27 years ago today. And then later went public and merged with lots of other things and still exists in some form today. In '99, I discovered Wiki because the original C2 Wiki was kind of the home of the agile programming community at the time, which was heavily driven by extreme programming, but also had these other things, that were sort of sister models that were running alongside it. And so I was participating in that a lot and almost instantly had the recognition of, oh, wow, this hypertexty, bushy hypertext model is something that needs to be merged into blogging because tags and categories in blogs are stupid. And, I write stuff that, different things across different days that are kind of tangentially related, and I shouldn't have to manually link those together and worry about linking in both directions and stuff like that. So I should do something with Wiki around that. And I also started running a little Wiki server on my laptop. And that became my notebook. I had like old Palm 3s and Palm 5s, and they had a little note app. And then those notes got sucked into Outlook. And then I figured out how to export them, and I sucked them into my private wiki. And so I had, already like 5-year-old notes that were lumped into there and then built on over the future. And so that corpus is still my notebook today. Everything is carried forward that I've done in wikis. As I've moved engines, I've migrated the text, changing the markup and the titles and things like that to make them move forward. And I even ran that private wiki locally on a couple Linux handhelds that I installed little Python subsets onto. So I would have my own sort of web browser running against a Python server on the same handheld for my notebooking. I finally got around to taking a wiki that already existed for the Zope engine, which was the Python web framework of the day. And so that became my Wikilog engine version 1. And I used that for a bunch of years. And I actually then launched a sort of hosting service that had 2 different offerings. One was a Wikilog kind of model, and the other was more of a private team wiki, collaborative wiki kind of thing. Neither of those went anywhere. They both had, a tiny handful of customers. The business wiki model very quickly went in 2 directions. One was the enterprise model, top-down sales, high price tags, consulting services, that whole kind of thing, like Social Text did. And then the other model was the free consumer ad-supported wiki model that was like, I don't even remember the name of them. I have a bunch of those listed on my site, and most of those have gone out of business because the ad model didn't scale enough for them to be sustainable as businesses. Over the years, I ended up at some point, the guys that were hosting my ZOP, which were I think in South America someplace, they were like, we don't want to host ZOP anymore, so you need a new solution. So I forced myself to then fork things over from Moin, which is a really old wiki engine built in Python, really like a framework for building wiki engines. It's just ridiculously complex with multi-language support and all this other kind of crazy stuff, which meant that every little change that you wanted to make, you had to try and figure out through like 6 layers of indirection where the feature actually was. It was really, really, really irritating, but it did the job. At some point, I wrote an ebook called Hack Your Life with a private wiki journal. That I published that as a Kindle book, but basically it was written on my wiki, and then I scraped down a subset of my wiki. And so I documented on my site the whole process that it came up with to say, the model I basically used was, I said, I'm going to write like a linear narrative that's going to be like 10 pages or 10 chapters, and so these are those, and that's kind of like the core narrative. And then those obviously refer to lots of pages in my wiki. And so I went through this list generation process of scraping the links from those pages and then going through manually and saying, oh, that page doesn't really belong there, this one does. And so I ended up with like 100 pages from my wiki that I wanted to bring over at the same time. And so then I did all this scripting to turn all of these scraped wiki pages into HTML pages locally. And then I applied different styles to links based on, is it going to be in the ebook, or is it another page that's in my Wikilog but not in the ebook, or is it on a third-party site? And so I had like 3 different styles for those links to show up and stuff like that. So it was kind of an interesting process. And writing this was one of those hate-based activities, which was sort of like Evernote was booming in popularity. And I'm like, well, okay, I see it's mobile. It's like the first mobile native kind of notebooking tool and has some cool features, but oh my God, I can't believe people are putting stuff into something that has no backlink capability. That's just freaking insane. And so I spent a year of my life working on this ebook and generating text and the whole thing, basically as a rant against standard notebooking. So it's kind of doubly ironic every time I see Tiago talk about Evernote. I'm like, get the hell out of here.
I think my favorite thing about it was the fact that they made it all the way to regular user land, which was really lovely. They've got an amazing history of, they specifically targeted journalists and investors as initial users, which helped build their hype machine. And then I was involved with a company which built a blogging platform on top of Evernote. And there've been lots of those since then in like Dropbox and other things like that. I was really mad when they started cloning separate interfaces, where they made one for that was customized for recipes. That was great. And I got my mom using it, and she loved it. And then they're like, we're actually going to kill all of those add-ons that were lovely. And then we learned our lesson around relying on centralized platforms, right, Bill?
Yes, it is a tough call. It is a tough issue of, do you take the open source model, and especially if you're a consumer type person, what are the trade-offs on those kinds of things? And it is a challenge, no question. So that was the same era that Evernote decided they should sell notebooks and pens and socks and all sorts of other bizarro swag. That was their growth model, they became a lifestyle company, which is really interesting, but took their eye off the actually keep the product working and getting faster and stuff like that. So it was a problem. And I mean, part of their challenge has always been that 97% of their users don't pay them $1. So they've got a fair amount of infrastructure of the care and feeding of a lot of people that have, negative utility for them. So that's, it's always tough to make a business on that. So let's see. So eventually Moin Moin was driving me crazy. And so I said, all right, having done this twice by forking other people's systems, I'm going to build my own from scratch, and it'll only have the stuff that I need and nothing else. I'll just steal the best ideas and tweak them. And so I built something in Flask, which is, I would guess, the number 2 Python framework these days behind Django. And so it's so the Wiki engine, because that was based on Zope, had all the content stored in the Zope object database, the ZODB, if you are as old as Morris, and you remember those things. Moin Moin used directories of files for everything. So it had this crazy, like every page would have a folder, and then there would be one page for the current version, like every iteration of the page would have its own separate file, and there was like a metadata file. So you'd have like 6 different files in one folder for one page. And so one of the issues you can run into at some point is your hosting service starts to say, you have too many file handles in use and you need to pay for a more expensive service and all sorts of things like that. So, so there was that stuff, and I just wanted some different kinds of features. So I built this thing. I migrated my public Wikilog onto it. At that point, I was still using the old Python local engine for my private notebook that was picky all that time. And so then I finally got around in 2020 to migrating my personal notebook into that. So I basically had 2 different spaces in the same database. And then I said, oh, I kind of like this model and I think other people should like it. And everybody's talking about digital gardening. Let me take that and turn it into a product that other people can pay me to run for them, since they don't want to, especially under the model of, I want to have my notes in public. I want to be able to access them from my phone. I don't want to play with synchronization games. And hey, browsers are actually pretty good user tools that have a lot of refinement to them over the course of 20 years. So instead of reinventing UXs for note taking, I'll just leverage the browser. And so that's been kind of my model since then. So this is, here, I'll just start in case anybody hasn't seen it. This is what my public Wikilog looks like. So it's essentially taking the recent changes idea from a wiki, saying what are the pages that changed most recently, and then it's rendering the first paragraph or first line basically from every page. So you get sort of a tweak and you get a more link, and you go in and you see things that are going on. And so here's Zv's latest article on COVID stuff. And, I boldface, I put all the excerpts in italic, and I add in all the links to different, wiki words, whether they exist or not. And then I should probably at this point mention, we'll circle back to, pardon me, the whole backlinks and sister sites kind of thing. So somewhere along the line, I think it was when I had Moin Moin in operation, I said, oh, I need to have a way to have my backlinks available. Why, in the Zwiki days, that was built into the engine. It was basically indexing the wiki links. And so it was low cost to render those. The key issue is in the old original wikis, every page header, you could click on the title and it would generate a backlink search for you. But if you wanted to have that list available all the time when you looked at the page, that's kind of an expensive transaction if it's not indexed. And so Zwiki gave that to you in the indexing. In Moin Moin, it did not. And so rather than turning on like a full text search engine, I instead built my own scraper system and basically created a separate database in Postgres that was all the page references. And so I use that for my backlinks, and I basically deliver that through a JavaScript widget that talks to this other service that I have running. And then at the same time, I mentioned that I started building a database of pages on other people's sites that were wiki-like, and then looking for cases where the name of that page matched the name of the page that somebody was on my site. So since this is the COVID-19 page, these 5 sites that I'm familiar with also have COVID-19 pages. And so I can jump over there and hopefully their site, I don't know why he had it in his database, but he killed his page. Hopefully Phil has his page still there. And so I can find those things.
Bill, I
Let's
think
see.
you had a stat. How many public wikis of this style did you find?
Well, I set the bar semi-high, and then like I started seeing all these lists of things, and I said, oh, I should connect to all these. And then I'd start looking at them, and I'd find out that 50% of them or 80% of them were private. So it's like, yes, I'm doing digital gardening, but it's only on my notebook, so nobody else can hit it. And then it's like, yes, I've got a public, digital garden. And so, oh, I'm so excited. And I go in, it's got like 6 pages. And 5 of those pages have these really weird long titles. So obviously the odds of somebody else having a page with the same title is roughly 0. So when I got down to like, what could I actually find that was people that had like 100 pages that had wiki-like names that were available in public, it was like 20 to 30 was what I was finding. And a bunch of those were FedWiki sites. And so I've rerun into the issue where a lot of FedWiki sites have pretty short lifespans. And so they get started up.
So hang on. So your bar of 100 pages in public,
yes,
with sort of generic or wiki word leaf pages.
Yes.
You found 30 sites.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that digital gardens might not be very big yet?
I think they are big but they are big as private tools. They are, and so the question is whether those tool makers will create a form of multi-user versions that include a public sharing of things. Like, are they going to stay, are they going to go from 1 user to 3 users who are like in the same company and they can see each other's notes, but nobody else can see them? Or are they also going to support, and now I've got a bunch of notes that anybody in the world can see? Right now, nobody's doing that stuff. You'll see like, I think it's Obsidian, the core tool is free, and then they have an Obsidian publish feature, which is like you can generate, I think it's a static site, it's the, baked versus fried weblog model of it. It'll render an HTML site from your notes, and that costs like $200 a year or something like that, as an add-on. And there's again like 3 people doing that, and they all have 4 pages each, kind of thing. So yes, digital gardens as a public ecosystem is almost as real as Web3 decentralization.
So Bill, I have some questions, because I think what you didn't talk about here is how you actually generated that much content. You talked about like migrating your content
Yes.
forward. I think the reason that you're finding a lot of digital gardens with less than 100 pages is people don't actually produce the content. They don't actually write, they don't actually outline, or they do it in such a way that it's not even possible to separate it in different pages, right? It's in some ephemeral context and goes away. So I'd love to know, like, when do you write?
Mm-hmm.
And like, when do you edit? Like, what does your day or week look like?
Cool. Yeah, great question. It has changed. I went through until, maybe 5 years ago, I spent just way too much time sitting at my computer reading and copying and pasting highlights, into a browser form and so forth. And then at some point, I decided that was not scalable, and phones came along and stuff. And so at this point, all of my article reading happens through Instapaper. And so when I find a page that I'm interested in, here, let me just come up here and put this away and say if I'm looking at something on Hacker News, and I don't even know, I don't know why I'm picking that. So let's just say what's happening in Pakistan today. And I find an article, and I've got a read later link up here that saves that into Instapaper. And then if I go into Instapaper, there's a a web UI, but I use that almost not at all. And so I'll find, here's my pile of stuff, and Instapaper, if you're not familiar with it, it saves a copy of the article. It rips out all the schmutz of navigation and ads. So you've just got the core of the article. And that's pretty nice. And here's all the folders that I've created over time. What I really mostly do 90% of the time is like I oversave things, And then the things that I really do want to read soon, I will put into my shortlist folder. And so that's sort of like my pre-curated reading list. And then this syncs to my phone. There are Android and iOS apps for Instapaper. And so when I go in my phone, I obviously can't share the link there, but what happens is, I can, just highlight something, and I can save that as a highlight, and I can also attach a note to it. And so that's where all of my reading happens. And then if it's an article that I finish and I save, then what I do is I like it. So there's the heart saying that this is one of my liked articles. And then Instapaper has an API. And so I scrape all of my liked files, and I pull all the highlights out, and then I generate a bunch of pages. So I'll show you the actual thing here. Because I was infected by the kind of Unix mentality of pipelines of stuff, and knowing that looping systems always break, I ended up using folders as my kind of pipeline of stuff. And so here, let me just bring that back so I can see that you guys are there. And so what'll happen is when I have one scraper that will say, get me my last 50 articles that I liked that have highlights. And that will be in my in my scraped, there we go. And so if I go into my folder here, and then I won't go into the details of that, but the point is that every article that I've saved is in here as a separate file. This is the Instapaper ID, and then the date that I saved it, and it takes the title of the article and tries to create a file name for that. And then what I do is I go back and I say, which ones do I actually want to move forward with? And so I will, on a Friday night or whenever I have the mentality, I will say, okay, I want to look at this article and I want to publish it. So I'm going to come in to edit it. I use BB Edit. And so here is, I've got a nice, like the title has the link automatically generated. This is all Markdown. I'm using Common Mark as my library. And so it's automatically turned every highlight into a highlighted, or an italic, style, so that that's already recognized as a quote. If I have a note attached to that, it'll be outside the asterisks at the end of the paragraph. So therefore I'll have a comment on the highlighted paragraph. And then I'll come in here and I'll say, oh, I want to make a page for Ginny Thomas. So I'll manually edit that. And so I'll take this and I'll say, I want to have a Ginny Thomas up front, and therefore, and then I need a comma and a space. And then I'll move the word wife into the link and clean those up. And then I'll bring this stuff and then I'll say, oh, I want to add that on there. And for Donald Trump, I want to move that to a Donald Trump page. So I add the name Donald and turn it into a link, and I go through here and then I add some other stuff. And so then when I'm done with that, I basically say, oh, here's the pages that I've modified. And now I look at oh, by the way, you can find on my Instapaper page, you can find a link to a YouTube video that I made that's like runs for 10 minutes or so, walking through the same process. So,
okay. So when do you do this stuff? Like, regardless of what you do, when do you do it?
It's pretty random. It's, I should probably just put it in my calendar, but in reality, it's just sort of like, oh, like sometimes it'll be, oh, it's been a while. Sometimes it's, oh, it's a Thursday night and I don't have the energy to do other chores, but I have enough energy to not just watch TV. So I'll do this as a thing to do. Or sometimes it's, oh, I know I've read a bunch of articles today about a particular topic, and I have some old ones about that too. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to focus on that topic. And so I'll come in here and I'll say, where's all my articles about Ginny? Okay, and so in this case, there's only the one, but some other time I'll say, I've read a bunch of Gordon Brandon articles, and so let me find those. And let's see if that's going to work. And so there's a bunch of articles, and so I'll choose to edit those and process those for the day. And so I go through, I edit them, and then I drag the ones that I'm going to publish into my to post folder. And then I run another script and it goes through that folder, and it uses it uses my API on my Wikilog to basically just do a post that says create a page with this URL, and here's the title tag, and here's the body, and save it. And so boom, Bob's your uncle. You know, I post 15 articles at one time that show up at the top of my Wikilog.
Cool.
So that's basically the bulk of that process.
That makes sense. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
Looks like we probably have time for like one question before we need to move on to Tony. Marc-Antoine, you had your hand up.
Yes, no, it's not a question. It's a comment, because we were talking about adoption of gardens and private versus public, and I think it's very. A lot of tools start as individual tools, and then at the other extreme you have the totally public tools. And I think it's very important to think of the use case of the kind of translucent. I'm doing something in my little corner private, then I want to show it to friends. I don't want to make it public because I know it's half-baked. I know it's not ready for consumption, and I may have made a horrible mistake. And basically it's all about face, right? But I will want to share it with a few friends. So this kind of in-between, okay, it's getting more ready to get more and more and more public. And I think we're all looking for this kind of weird in-between progressive circles of publicization, and which publication is the extreme case.
My take on that is I feel like that's another 6 people. You know, like if you build that tool, I think, you know, I'll go from 30 websites to 40, you know, that have a bunch of pages that have been published. I just don't think, I think it's one of those things like I feel like this is one of those cases where people go like, oh, if only I had this feature, then I would publish so much more. And then people build the feature and 6 people use it, you know, and it doesn't really.
I'll actually make you got hot takes. I'll have a quick hot take. I think this feature is why Facebook ate the open web.
Because they enabled easy publishing.
Because
they have an easy publish to my friends feature.
Yeah. That is interesting.
Over.
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot there. We should we definitely should move on to Tony. Tony has a pretty provocative talk title as well, of like why we should use org mode as the interchange format for all tools for thinking.
And Bill, thank you so much for the speed run of 30 years or thereabouts.
Seriously,
a little messy, and so people should feel free to use whether it's the Discord channel or something else. If they have follow-up questions, I'm more than happy to rant at the drop of a dime.
Yeah, I actually do have a lot more questions, but I'll save those. Yeah, so thanks, Bill. Tony, you have permission to screen share, or if you want to screen share?
Sure. Yeah, I will. Hopefully, I better be able to screen share. Otherwise, I'm in trouble. So yeah, thanks for having me at this. And I'm kind of sorry I'm going after Bill, because there was so much stuff to think about there. I've kind of forgotten what I was going to talk about to an extent. So I'll have to be, I'm kind of going to be making it up on the fly. But actually, and then a quick follow up to just Marc-Antoine's thing there. Google Circles, I loved. Wasn't it called Circles? You could define different circles of people that you could share things to.
Yeah, and the G plus, was it G plus, Google plus?
Yes, yeah, Google plus. Yeah, that was the only social network that I actually ever partook in, and it was because I could direct. I don't, I want this going to my work friends, not my, soccer.
Yeah,
friends.
but if you look at that, you'll see again that was a feature that ended up being used by a very small number of people. Everybody thought like that would be a huge like unlocking of sharing of information, because you could kind of do it in a controlled way, and nobody bothered.
Yeah. Well, that's for me. Anyway, so let me try and get my presentation up here. Share screen. Wait. Oh, desktop. Okay, sorry. All right. Let's see. So hopefully this works. As you can see, I was working on this up until the last minute here, or tweaking it until the last minute. So I guess let's start a little bit about me. So this is kind of like Wayback Machine day here. So I came of age. I started my career as a knowledge engineer in the late 80s, fresh out of graduate school with an AI degree. And that didn't last very long. The kind of ship sank beneath the waves. It was the last time AI was going to change the world and save us all. Then moved on to a career of individual engineer, engineering manager, software architect, running groups, kind of different places, but generally ending up in interop kind of world, in data transfer, and all along tracking this kind of the same set of stuff Bill was talking about. You know, I used the first CERN server to set up our code comment toolkit, and I used Tiddly Wiki early on, and a lot of these kinds of things. I built product tracking tools for teams, and so kind of all that. Most recently, doing healthcare interop at a company called Athena Health, an EHR company, pushing data around the healthcare ecosystem, which is non-trivial. And then they got bought out. I took my package and decided I was going to build my own thing. Started researching in the healthcare machine learning space. But on the side was building this tool that I've always wanted. I'm calling it BrainTool, to integrate my text-based notes with my web searching bookmarks, online resources. So I've been working on that. Got some, positive feedback, and so I've kind of gone all in on that in the last year or so. And since it kind of bridges, the web world into org mode, I've now kind of started to pay more attention to this tools for thought ecosystem, and been catching up with, and just kind of became aware of this group and been catching up with it. I really loved, and so kind of what's my take on tools for thought? Try and do this quickly. I thought Maggie's talk last time around was really great. The notion of these cultural systems. And the idea that a map is kind of a tool for thought, a conceptualization of a 3D space and numbers, and the number 0 got me to thinking that, I think what are tools for thought? The original tools for thought is the meme in the Richard Dawkins selfish gene sense. A gene is a self-replicating little biological entity, and a meme is a self-replicating little, earworm mind thought. Memes are the ideas and patterns of thinking that kind of bootstrap our mind. So the idea of a map, the idea of a number, the idea of a written expression. So memes, so tools for thought is a very lofty term in my mind. And so so BrainTool is not a tool for thought in that very high level conceptual sense. So more looking, personal knowledge management, productivity tools. I do like this term second brain app, because the approach I'm taking with BrainTool is kind of in that same Unix kind of sense of I want to do a really good job at allowing the average knowledge worker to save and store the information that comes through their browser every day and get back to it and manipulate just that level of their world. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make the case here for org mode as a generic backing store for second brain apps. What are second brain apps? These kinds of things, tasks, to-do managers. Maybe I should have my chat screen up here in case there's, here we go. So task managers, to-do list managers, journaling tools, outliners, note-taking tools, Evernote, bookmark and resource, personal relationship manager, library book tracking, resource managers, calendaring, the latest, Zettelkasten linked block tools, and then a lot of the kind of stuff that Bill was demonstrating, macros automation, the kind of thing that gives you your spaced repetition feedback, or that scrapes this set of sites on an occasional basis. So in my mind, that's what we're talking about when we talk about tools for thought. For second brain apps.
I really haven't seen SBA as an acronym, and I would really hate that acronym to get adopted, because we already have
too many acronyms.
enough carnage in this space.
Yeah.
Has anyone else ever seen that?
Tiago has tweeted about it. He likes the term, and it kind of. I mean, I'm open to. I mean, so BrainTool is not a tool for thought. It's a tool for doing something that you need to do in your brain that does one little thing. It's an app.
I never liked the idea of second brain to begin with. We have minds. Externalize your intellect.
Well, that's a higher. I mean, again, yeah. How a higher level do we want to work on?
Anyway, it's sort of interesting. My blink reaction was really just that I had never seen that before.
Fair. So anyway, preaching to the crowd here. Tools, there's tons of tools. Tools come and go. Maybe I come and go between tools. I think the general, I think Bill and I are aligned at least. And by best of breed tools, Unix piped together fashion is better than one kitchen sink. Allows me to share my data at different levels. I think that this is not really, related to interop so much as having real time, ownership of your own data. I think is, this is okay. This is our offloaded minds, perhaps, or second brains, or our notes. It's private stuff. So putting it out there on the cloud is a little scary for people. So. Or at least giving it to any given set of apps is scary to people. So having ownership of their data, I think, is key. And then kind of taking that several steps up, here's all of this data. The world is changing. We're leveraging ourselves to the next level with memes. Now they're outside our brain. They're out wild in the world. 3 Spider-Men pointing at each other. That's a meme. So where does that go? Who knows? But it goes in better places if the data is open and accessible and people have the opportunity to share it. Machine learning models are great. So I can train a general model and then I can tune it on your data set, and then you can query it in natural language ways. Blockchains and TFTs are great ways of tracking, maintaining kind of ownership or traceability across digital assets. So all important. So what are the primitives in most kind of these second brain apps? It's outlines, hierarchies, that's kind of the addressable, the block in some sense, but nested blocks. It's marked up text, the stuff that Markdown does. It's links between resources and 2 other resources. It's lists and numbered lists, indented lists, checked lists, tables and spreadsheet type functions. It's tasks with life cycles, to do, next, cancel, duplicate, done, with deadlines and priorities, kind of your Jira type stuff. And it's tags for what they're worth, and then kind of meta properties, meta comments, executable blocks, these kinds of things. So, in line, I should know the number XKCD, 172 N+1 standards. Where can we find this stuff? Surprise, we can find it all in org mode. I say here 20 years of evolution, but emacs has been around there was a thing on emacs Reddit recently that made me realize I started using emacs in the mid 1980s on ZMax on a list machine. So, nearly 40 years, and org mode was built on a lot of iterations before it got started, and it's been around for 20 years with a lot of smart text focused, productivity focused people who are into automating their workflows continuously and refining this thing. Unfortunately, hidden behind these sky high learning curves, where just the wizards who can ascend to the top tower get to take part in the power, and somewhat facetious, but I think where's a better tool on usability totally aside, where's a more capable tool? Natively supports all of the outline primitives. So let's take a look at it. Sorry, I had a little screen organization here with all the images. Gonna move you guys out of the way. So this is my browser. This is I'm in a tab. I'm gonna open my BrainTool saver. Up it comes. I can just hit enter a couple times. This is kind of optimized for fast saving stuff. I can hit enter a couple times and it'll get saved off into the scratch space. But this is my topic tree. It's expandable. I can search, you know, so I'm gonna save this web resource away against a topic. I'm gonna call it tools for thought topic. I can enter some notes here if I want, but I'll just save it. Hopefully this is visible enough for folks. Now over here, and again, I got to keep moving my chat window around. Over here, here's where it is. This item is now associated with this tab. I can add some notes. And kind of move it around, edit, etc. It's associated with that tab. I can close it. Oops, I lost my spot. So close it, or maybe I'm in this Tools for Thought interop workspace. So I want to open my Tools for Thought resources. Here they open up, and so you know each one is a tab that's associated with the window in BrainTool. So you know that's kind of that's a brief overview of kind of what that's trying to do. It's trying to be a tool for the average knowledge worker to manage their world. I'm going to search backwards here for daily. I have some Wordle daily. I'm finding all the where all the daily stuff is. Okay, here's where I want it to be. This is my set of things that I check daily. And this kind of from the purposes of getting into org mode a little bit. I'm going to turn this item into a to-do, edit it, and I'm doing this with the keyboard. So now I have a to-do here. I'm gonna hop into emacs, and I'm in the wrong buffer here. So here's my email. This is that same data. That data, the BrainTool, I should have said explicitly, backing store is this BrainTool file, which is an org mode file that captures all of the information and is a standard org mode that is then intended to be integrated into other tools. So you can see here's this admin under check daily. I did something there. I don't know what happened. So here's this to-do item. I'm now gonna just give you a brief org mode, how org mode provides another set of productivity type tools. So this is my org mode agenda file, which pulls out which can be customized in a gazillion different ways, but the way I use it, and I'm not really a very heavy org mode user, or at least I don't know all the details, but so this is my agenda. It's got all my to-dos in it. I can filter those by their source. This is the BrainTool file. I can also filter them by tag. So I got my BrainTool 1.0 project. I could restrict to that. So this is kind of what I use to manage what's going on in my world. If I put on follow mode, you can see as I move through the items, it shows up in the left-hand buffer as to what it is. So here in the case of this one, I'm going to say, I'm going to mark it as done. So now, and save that same BrainTool file. So now, kind of that's kind of the mode of operation of these two things. I also, since we're talking about the value of org mode, wanted to point out that the presentation I've just been walking through is an org mode file itself. So this is that same org mode file that has the same set of stuff in it. I just generate, another little tool that generates it off into an executable HTML presentation. So hopping back, BrainTool here, you can see I'm told the file has changed. I refresh, and now this item is marked as done. So I can operate over here. I can operate over there. I've got two separate tools that are working together. I can show here importing org file. So let me import that TFT rocks because it has some web resources in it that I might be interested in. So it gets imported, and here it is. It got imported under TFT interop because I forgot to mention, if I look here at the top of this file, you can see it has an address, which is where it lives in my topic hierarchy. So here's where it is. Here's it. And for example, this is the data. You can see the data. And then there's this set of resources. So, this is the, at the end of my presentation, I list a set of org resources. So here's the org parser. So now that's now a resource that's usable in my BrainTool. I've imported a set of resources, and now I can use them to control my browser. So that's that piece. And then going back, I lost my presentation. Oh, here it is. I have a link to it.
So all these files are
there's only one file right now. It's all just
local on disk
file
that you're just opening in a browser.
Local on disk or shared to a Google Drive from which it can then sync to various places. For example, so this allows me, here it is using Orgsly on my phone, which I have a recording of. So this is my BrainTool file, and then the same set of stuff in there. Instead of and I generally use it on my phone, as you can see here, to click. It's all my notes, but it is a handy way to control a browser. I've also got a demo of it running on the plain org app on iOS. And then you can see he does a better job of rendering the tables than some of the other tools. So bunch of tools can use this covers the bases. Bunch of tools can use it. What's the proposal? The proposal is so Carl Voigt has done a good job of kind of popularizing this idea of taking the org language out of emacs and making it something that's a common standard. It has been criticized as not being a standard because it's really just a bunch of emacs Lisp files that parse text. But it has a model, and there's a number of parsers and stuff becoming available. And Carl has advocated just defining this one level org down mark level 1, which is a bunch of stuff. I think that's a bit too coarse grained. I would like to define org 0 is, okay, you can read and write plain text and you won't screw up my markup. So any given text editor can be used with this brain file data. You can ignore the markup and you got all your text. Outlines, okay, we got, that's the subset of org that supports outlines, the basic markup, so bold, italics, links, etc. Lists and checkboxes, tables, the stuff we talked about, tasks, tags, properties, which are kind of metadata kind of things, which allow for extensibility. And then the general automations. So org allows embedded blocks that can be executed in a given environment. So I'd like to see, kind of some kind of specification of that. As I said, there's a set of parsers. So it can be, oh, I forgot to show the LogSeq part of the demo. I guess I don't know where we are with time. I guess I'll see if there are questions. And if not, I can, but I'm not a big LogSeq user, but I can bring up LogSeq and see the same file and edit it with LogSeq and see it changed in all the various places.
Awesome. Yeah. Does anyone have questions? Tony, so roughly the first one of these you've been to, lots of folks basically annotating and linking in real time. Our chat logs end up being themselves little live fertilizer. Yeah. With deep links into Bill's brain when he's on the call as well. Does anyone have calls or questions or comments for Tony right now?
Okay.
So can I jump in real quick?
Go for it.
This is probably beyond the scope, but I guess I've always loved plain text. I'm a heavy Vim user. It's what I do all my programming in and a lot of note taking. But I think more recently, I'm starting to come to a conclusion that text is the source of a lot of the problems, that's kind of the base level representation, because text itself is just another indirection layer on whatever it's modeling. So I guess, I don't know, I was just curious if you had any either pushback or just reflections on that in general.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to scope at the beginning. I've jumped into this tools for thought, and I think you guys are aiming way higher. I'm trying to. Someone said about Evernote jumping the shark a little bit to mass market adoption. I'm looking to build a tool. I know everybody who I've interacted with in my professional career, all knowledge workers, are tab overloaded and need a productivity tool in their browser to manage their data, and then also need to-do lists and these other things. And I'm saying that's supported in this ecosystem. Can it be extended to wire into your neural connections in your brain? There's a long way to go from, okay, let's just put.
I think the phrase org mode and mass market is, I mean, that breaks my brain.
Fair, that's fair. And as I said, the reason is because org mode is tied to org inside emacs on top of eLisp, and it's just a huge, the learning curve is unascendable. But it's just text. If you don't have to edit it, you can read it very easily, and with a few small tools, you can start to edit it, and it works in all these contexts.
Bill, since you said I will fight you, do you want to give a quick hot take?
I mean, I have this weird, proving his point in a sense. I have like way too many tools. And so like I wrote a piece last year, I think it's called something like my collaboration ware process. And it was talking about how in my workday, I was like using Jira and Asana and FreeMind and Miro and all this stuff. And I'm kind of still in the camp that that's the right way to go. Number one, I think integration across those things is less important than it seems. And not many of those are keepers. Like my personal corpus, is like one thing. And so I want to think more about permanence there. But where I do my collaboration work in work is so tied to that organizational history. I don't feel the same need to have everything fit together. And the other piece of it, the other key points are, number one, as long as it has a URL, I can point to it from something else. That sort of becomes my integration method. And number two, especially in, now that we have supercomputers in our pockets, I kind of like purpose-built UI that is optimized for that. And so I want my to-do list to be as easy to use as Asana or something else, where it like fits on the phone nicely and I can drag tasks up and down the list and stuff like that. I don't want to give that up for the control and single tool that touches everything kind of thing. I just feel like there's too many sacrifices there, and I know that it's a trade-off, but I just feel like I'm okay making that trade-off, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
And I also felt like, again, showing how old I am, I was having conversations with Mitch Kapoor at the time that he was starting his open source application foundation for the Chandler project, which was supposed to be a PIM that was going to compete with Outlook with a P2P model on the back end. And it was like built in Python with like Zope as the database underneath it, I think, and all sorts of crap like that. And I thought that was like such a fabulous architecture, again, until phones came along, and the fact that our laptops are behind NAT walls. And so you can't get to your, nobody wants to run a server. Nobody's home computer is accessible from outside the home, and you've got your phone with you. I just feel like trying to be the, master of your domain ends up being more work than it gets out of it. It's kind of where I fall on it. But I totally, like, for people that will do it, I think that's awesome. For you and Paul Ford, the org mode thing is like definitely the way to go. But I just feel like, it doesn't work for me, and I don't think there's that many people it works for. So
I think one of the complicated things is that interop, there's some phrases out there, export considered harmful. And that's essentially what this is. It's not interop. So you can build parsers that can read markdown files or can read org mode files. That is not interop. That is at best export. So interop in part also means that the collaboration, to me, collaboration even with your future self. So that is one of the things that can't be done in these plain text formats. I'm not against Markdown as an interface or org mode as an interface.
Right. So
it doesn't
I don't
solve
understand.
the problem
Explain.
of things like sync or annotation or anything that literally as a single user.
I didn't understand. How can I? What's the gap between with communicating with my future self? I didn't follow.
So you're gonna have to add something like check this into Git or
Sure.
some, you know, again,
Okay,
I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You don't get versionings,
I
you
mean,
don't get any of that stuff like that because you're using a file-based format.
I mean, yeah, all data is file-based, right? Everything
it is not
somewhere as a file. I mean, we had this Twitter conversation a little bit.
Yeah, it is not. You've got wire protocols and you've got a bunch of other things like that that you do things between
which
systems.
are defined reading and writing from files. Data.
Well, databases technically. If you're talking about an app, apps will build data stores based on the needs of whatever that app is.
Sure.
So if it's multi-user, it will need to be structured in a certain way for efficient storage.
Yes, I mean, I'm not saying org is everything. I'm not saying it solves all of the problems. And actually, you know, to my last point here, we've all seen this several times. The best standard doesn't win. The N+1 standard. If there's a tool that is at least more generic and usable than what you've got right now, and it enables the next few steps forward, then that is better than waiting for the solution that handles everything.
Oh, for sure. So it's just, it doesn't solve the problem of interop. It is a file format that could be used and consumed, and it's great that LogSeq uses it. And there are a bunch of other things like that.
I feel like that's a little semantic. I mean, in the healthcare world, files are interop. I take HL7 data, which is text files, over a socket, and I write it into a text file, and then I process it into my system, which is an RDB, but it was a file that I got transferred. And my team at Athena spent a lot of time with files that were too big and partitioning them all up. And so it's a way. Is it ideal? I don't know. Tools for thought are complicated things. Are we ever going to be able to communicate purely in memes? I don't know. We have emoticons and emojis, and we have more and more ways of expressing ourselves. But a lot of our 90% of the population of knowledge workers is, to Bill's earlier thing of where are all these knowledge gardens? Let's make it easy to get to, to leverage all of that value of those process savants putting stuff into org for the last 20 years.
I think it's really great that you showed all the mobile apps. I think mobile apps are absolutely key for a ton of users.
Yeah, and getting data into this format is that's not up. Mobile is very hard to get that. I mean, if I'm taking a voice memo or something, it's not going in my org mode file. So, yeah, you can consume on the mobile this kind of data pretty well, as I think I showed, but creating is hard on mobile in general.
So for me, a driving application for the last several years has been people with physical disabilities using devices to control a game system or a computer, etc. And so, I mean, thinking about files through that lens, you're basically talking about.
No, that's not. I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, I agree. That's not file.
Right, but it is the same. It should be able to accommodate the same. So the interop issue is both about connecting things and then saying
Yeah,
what it means on both
sure.
sides.
There's semantics, there's syntax, and there's
And I think,
transport.
and that's I guess where I think the spatial part of it is so essential, is like really the thing that things are indexed on is you run into an issue. So if you hyperlink two things and then you hyperlink more things, if these things do not have a spatial relationship, what you're essentially doing is stitching independent axes together. So you quickly run into what in the machine learning world they call the curse of dimensionality, if you want to make sense of the space. You need spatial relationships in order to be able to understand how data connects together. And this comes very naturally in files, for instance, which are all ordered in some linear fashion. And I don't know, a lot of that is just kind of intuitive and falls out naturally in how people design text editors and so forth. But as soon as you don't have that environment, you kind of lose all of that context that
yeah, I mean,
you're depending on.
And I caveat all this with I'm not saying that at the larger scale tools for thought, but I make an explicit decision here to have my topic tree be hierarchical, and I haven't implemented tags or links between things yet. I could see things having multiple hierarchies, but yes, that once it's modeling all of potential human thought is complicated. I'm just trying to inch us forward to let's be able to have my to-do list manager and my bookmarks be synced. And actually, I see Chris Aldrich here also had his question here about how often I delve into the long tail of my notes, and not I mean, I guess I wish I was like Bill. I do not curate my notes to any great extent. I'm using my BrainTool file to create a bunch of web resources and automate a bunch of things I do online in my kind of day-to-day life. I like the fact that is then linked into, say, my devlog, which is where I keep my daily notes that I do have. I do search backwards through that. That's an org mode file to look for the last time I talked to Carl about X, Y, or Z. But I'm not a digital gardener. I'm not looking for 3-dimensional maps of my notes. I think if you want to build that on top of this set of structures, you can do that, I think. It comes down to there's a block that contains other blocks. There's a syntax for containment and notes and markup and links and lists and tables and this stuff that you need to do's and tags and dates, the stuff you need to use to manage most of your day-to-day work life.
Awesome. We're definitely at time right now. Tony, that was thank you so much. That like I said, the mobile in particular is very interesting. Do you have a link to your presentation that's published somewhere?
No, as I said at the very start, I mean, this presentation, it's an org mode file. I was editing it until Bill started talking, and then I stopped. So
amazing. If you can, if you can get us a link somewhere, if you want to share it publicly. Yeah. I know Bill put his link up, and we'll put that up along with the video when we post it. Thank you everyone for the May edition. We will see you on the internet and in the community. A round of applause for Tony.
Thank you. Thank you, Boris and Jeff, for making this. I'm very glad I found you guys. This is great. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll try and make it to New York. I would like to do that, but I'm just back from vacation that day. So.
I think that yeah, New York is going to be great, but it's also going to be our first run at doing something local. I wouldn't expect a ton of it. We'll see how many people we get signed up, but in real life is obviously way different, and I want to encourage people in their own local area to start doing little meetups as well, right? I think there's some parallels with early blogging that I see in the TFT space, and I think because of the pandemic, that has prevented local meetups from forming. So my prediction is more local and IRL with notes soon. I'm going to hit stop on the recording.